Okay, here we are back in Unity, and we're going to be talking about the animator and animation control in Unity. But first, I wanted to take a look at that last model that we looked at and show its import settings. This was animated in a third-party package. Lightwave was used, I believe, for this particular animation. The model came in from a SolidWorks CAD file. And all the animations were done on a single timeline. So we had multiple different animations. One is basically just a still, the vacuum open, the electrical panel open, and then the hopper open. And so when you bring these in by default, your entire animation from 1 to 100 will be listed there as the base stack. And what we're doing is we're basically just taking that, adding clips to it. You're going to rename the clip however you like, and then you're going to set the in and out point for that particular animation segment. And so you go through your timeline. In this case, we have 1 to 49 is the first animation, 52 to 70, and then 72 to 100 is the third. And once you set those up and apply these particular changes, what you'll end up with is in that object, you'll have all of your mesh objects, and then in the end, you'll see the animations that you've set up named as you've named them in your import settings. And so when you're importing content from another 3D package, all your animations that you're going to be using will be on one timeline, and then you'll use the import settings in the animation to segment those into their specific sub-animations. And so we're going to take a look at this drill. This drill is also a SolidWorks CAD file that was imported. And we basically did the animation here inside of Unity. So we have an on-off control to display this graphic of features and benefits. It also displays a indicator that you can touch the button. And so here we're controlling the button animation. We're controlling the sound of the drill, as well as an animation of the drill in action through the touch of the on-off button. And so we're going to take a look at how that gets set up. But before we jump too far into that, we have a basic little cube animation. And that's going to show us how we set up the animator and then how we can control the animator from our interactive touch controls. And so first thing, let's go to our animation. And you'll notice we have the cube and we have a point light as a child of that cube. And I made the point light a child just to show one particular feature. We're just going to call this box. And so here's our animation for holding the keyframes for this cube animation. And we'll notice when we go to add properties, not only do we have the properties for rotation and position, but we also have the full control over the light. So all the properties that are in the light component itself are available to us, so we can enable, disable, and then we can also change colors, things of that nature, as well as control its position and or whether it's active or not. So all these controls, any children of an item that you start your animation on, will become available, and then all the components within that particular object will become available to create animation for. And so this we're going to just basically do a simple rotation. So we're going to jump to the last keyframe. In the past we showed the record button. In this case we're going to show another way to set the key. So we rotate that 360 degrees. And then this center button here for add keyframe will write that keyframe into its position. And so now we have this box that rotates 360. If you jump into the curves, you'll notice there's an automatic kind of ease in, ease out to all the keyframes when you set them up by default. We want this to be just a linear. And so we can go down to the tangents and just set that to linear, and that'll straighten that out. We can do the same for the beginning. Set linear. Oops. Let's get the right keyframe up. So now when we play this animation, it won't slow down in between its loops. So there's our basic animation for the box itself. And then what we want to do is turn this light off in the beginning. Set the keyframe there. And then normally it would pop on at the end. Since that's already set, we want to pop it on like midway through. So pop it on and make sure that key is set there. So now if we look at this, it basically just does a rotation. And now we're going to create another animation, because you can create multiple clips for this particular cube, and that's what's going to show up in the animator when we start working with these clips. So we'll set up box 2, and we're just going to use the position of this. And so we're going to go to the last keyframe. Let's move this over, and we'll set a position there. And so now we have 2 clips. We jump into the animator. We'll see we have that box 2, and by default, this is how, in most cases, we'll see the animator start out. And so by default, it's just going to play the first clip that we have set up for it. And so in this case, we just take a look at that. It'll just play that and loop that forever. And if you're just doing a single animation and you want it to play automatically like we did for our entrance animation, you're pretty much good to go. For interactivity, though, we want to control when each of these animations play and how they play. And so by default, when a experience begins, it starts at the enter. It comes into automatically one default state, right? And so this is basically called a state machine. It'll keep track of all the different states of animation that we have playing at any given time. So we don't want it to jump right into the box immediately. We want to create an empty state. And this empty state is going to become the default, so that when we enter, it'll just jump into this empty state. There's no animation on it, and so effectively we have nothing that is going on. And so to get from one particular state to another, whether it's an animation or an empty state, you're going to create transitions. And these transitions connect from one particular animation state into another. And so if you click on the transition, we have conditions for this particular transition, or we have an exit time. And so the exit time is referring to the exit time of this particular animation here. And so this does have a limited time. It runs for 30 frames or so. So if we were to play this now, it would just jump out of, and we're going to switch this in a second here to not maximize it so we can see what's going on here. So we play this again, it'll automatically jump into this state. As soon as that state has an exit, it'll jump into this one and then just loop forever. So you can create interactivity by controlling the condition for this particular state. And we do that again with triggers. And so if we set a trigger, the animator has layers and parameters. Under the parameter drop-down, we can set a trigger. And so we're going to set this for spin. And this little button here will emulate sending this trigger into the animator. And so now if we go to this transition and we set the condition, by default we only have one in here, spin, so it just sets it for us. And so now when we play this animation, it'll jump to the start state and just loop. And as soon as we hit that trigger, it'll jump into the box state. And so now we might want to just have this play once and make a transition back to this empty state. And here, it'll use the exit time for this particular animation. It'll play it once and then automatically jump back to the empty state. So you either need an exit time or a condition for this to actually work. And so we're going to go in, it'll play once and jump right back. Play once, jump right back. And so that's basically the way that you can set up different animation controls using triggers. So now if we jump over to our box, you'll notice that we have the same collider that we did earlier in the example. We'll set that for trigger. And we have also the animator controller in here, which was made automatically for us when we created the animation. If you need to create your own, you can basically just create, and then on this list you'll see animator controller, and give it a name that you like. But in this case, it automatically made it for us. And so what we're going to do, since we have the box collider, we're going to go ahead and do the same that we did in the previous example. We'll set a trigger. So when we click on that particular box, we can add our item that we want to control. We're going to control this cube. And what we're going to do is we're going to go into the animator controller. You'll notice we have the animator controller since that's part of our item. This is a longer list. It drops down, but you'll see at the bottom there's set trigger. And so we're going to use the set trigger. And then it's looking for a name. And we're going to supply it with this same name that we used in our animator. And so we're going to send it spin. And effectively, it's going to do the same thing as this little testing button does. And so when we touch the cube, it's going to trigger this transition into the box. It'll play once, and then it should come back to its finished position. And so there it is in the new state. We can touch the box and have it play. So now let's get rid of this transition back, because what we want to do is we have this other animation where the box moves over. If you had multiple animations that are strung together, you can simply create a transition from one to the other. When this one gets done playing, it'll go over to this and play that. And so let's just try that once. So click the box, it'll spin, move right into its move position, and then it'll just loop in this position. So now we can copy this. This is sort of a neat function. So we just copied this animation. It's got the exact same animation as it did before. But we can set the speed to -1. And that's going to play this animation basically in reverse. So now we can make a transition to it. And so now we'll have loop, animate, move, and then playback. And this will end up looping forever. And so if we didn't want this to loop forever, we could stop the loop, but we can also just transition this back to our beginning state, and that'll have its exit time and then just be stuck here until we interact once more. So we click the box, and then it stops back into its original position.